Thank you very much for tuning in today for this fireside chat. With me today, I have Charu Sharma, I'm very sorry, from Delhivery. My name is Matias Madou. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Secure Code Warrior. And Charu has an extensive background. She has roughly 12 years experience. She's a senior manager today with a focus on software compliance. She's 5.5 years with the company, and her expertise mainly lays into data protection and data privacy. Maybe another good thing to note is she is an engineer, and I love it when engineers move into security because ultimately they're the best. So welcome, Charu.
Thank you very much for having me, Matias, and thank you for this hyped introduction. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Charu, what do you like the most about your role?
Well, my role, honestly, Matias, I consider myself lucky because over the past 12 years or so, I have got the opportunity to work across different domains, which includes, varying from data privacy to cybersecurity to software compliances. And the best part has been that I don't just consult people or guide them or train them or even run projects with them. The best part is that I am actively involved in brainstorming the right solutions with the development teams and decision making, which makes me love my job. And which this doesn't just gives me, a good learning curve. What I like the most about it is that I feel that I'm contributing towards the fortification of the cyberspace. Although the contribution could be significantly low, but it really makes me feel good.
Nice, very nice. So how in your mind, like how is privacy and security? How are they different?
All right. Well, that's very interesting because until I came into privacy, I was as naive as anybody else. To me, privacy and security were like similar things. But privacy is very subjective. In fact, for instance, on a lighter note, people who live in joint families can relate with it because they probably have no privacy or very limited privacy. So I'd rather talk about data privacy and data security in the technology space. So to put this in simple words, privacy is, for example, if a business is using an individual's personal data, let's say my personal data, and if they're using it to build products or run their business, I would want to have complete control of what's happening with my data. I would want to know what all are they going to do with my data, who all will be given access to, and what all kind of data do they need. And on top of that, I want to be the very important stakeholder in decision making whether this data, if, for example, I'm not comfortable tomorrow with that business and I don't want them to process my data anymore, I want to exercise my rights because privacy is the most fundamental right of every individual across the globe. That's how it should be. And so I'd like to exercise my rights. I may want to get my data deleted from that business, or I may want to ask them to, give me a copy of it. I may want to port it. I may just want to probably just, object the kind of processing they're doing. So those are certain things as an individual, that's what privacy is about, individuals' personal data. So having said that, security, on the other hand, is an integral part of privacy. So one cannot commit to privacy unless they give you security, or so security is more of mechanics of preventing the misuse of the personal data. So security is just one part of it.
So I couldn't agree more. And actually, a lot of different companies are treating our data in very different ways. And some of them are doing a really good job. Some of them are doing a very poor job. And I think what you just described is absolute bare minimum of what they should do with our data. So in your mind, do you think that privacy and security, do they have to go in parallel?
I'd say most definitely yes. They have to go in parallel because privacy is more of a cultural thing to me. However, security is the mechanism by using which I'm going to serve the privacy or achieve privacy of an individual. So this is a thing that has to go hand in hand. It's not one after the other. It has to go. So it's privacy is more of the mindset thing.
Excellent. And so How do we ensure that data privacy and data security, like how is that within the software application? How does that work?
Ensuring data privacy and security? Well, I would say that's a very mind-bending question for me, Matthias, because honestly, when it comes to security, sky is the limit. There are countless wonderful solutions out there in the market to help us with security. But the biggest question here is, I hope you would agree with me on that, that biggest question is, where do we get started when it comes to privacy and security? Ensuring is definitely, nobody can can give the commitment that I ensure data privacy and security to you. It's just that everybody's trying their bit. So the point is, where do we get started? So to simplify this, I'm going to break this into two categories. One is securing the data within the software application, and another one would be securing the application itself. Now, these are two different worlds altogether, because it involves a lot of different dynamics. So for the first part, let's say where I'm going to talk about where we can talk about securing the data within the application. So this can start from making things go live and making the software very, very vulnerable as well. But first and foremost is that we have to learn where the data is. For us to even get to that point, we have to I'm going to again simplify this between data privacy by default and privacy by design. These are two concepts which will help us get into securing the application, the data within the application.
So if you don't mind, if I can interrupt you, like, are these different? Like privacy by default and privacy by by design? To me, they seem to be very similar. Can you shed some more light on what you see as the difference in there?
Sure. But that's a very good question, because that's where most of the people get confused, and they think that privacy by default and privacy by design are same things. But they're logically very, very different. When I say privacy by default, this is more of setting the right foundation for your software or your business processes or the services that you're going to provide to your customers. So privacy by default precisely means that when you are designing your product or your service or your business processes, you have to keep in mind that the moment you collect personal data, or you access them or control them, or share them with somebody or store them, we have to ensure that that is minimized. When I say minimized here, Matthias, it means that, one, we have to ensure whatever we do with this personal data has to have a consent from the data subject, whose personal data it is. Secondly, it has to be only very limited to whatever is required for the business. Right now, businesses are, kind of collecting data because they think that they may not have a use case today, but they may have a use case tomorrow. And with this, individuals like us, we don't really get to know what is happening inside, with our data. So another important aspect of data privacy by default is that along with this minimization, we also have to minimize the linkability or the identifiability of this personal data, which precisely means that wherever possible, we should be de-identifying this data and using it for the business, whether it is for analysis. This way, we will have minimal or probably no impact on someone's personal identity. So that is privacy by default. However, on the other side, privacy by design is more like, what do you keep in mind? How do you? That's more of how, to be honest. How do we ensure security? How do we ensure that security is there while you are designing the product or the business or the services that we're talking about? So that's the difference between data privacy and data security. Data privacy by design and privacy by default. So in fact, when it comes to privacy by design, there are numerous controls. Sky is the limit again. There are endless controls, security controls that you can implement when it comes to privacy by design. But if I was to start somewhere, I will say that in order for us to implement privacy by design as a concept or as a principle, we first have to learn where the data is. Most of the companies at the moment, they probably would not even have an answer to this, which all databases, which all applications right now store that. This may not come very handy to them. they would know about it, of course, if they have to find out. For the first and foremost step is to find out where the data lies, probably tag it or map it, and classify the data. After that, soon after this is done, we have to also find out, before we get into the control part, do we have the consent for whatever we're doing with the data? That's the question that an organization should ask themselves. Do we have a explicit or consent or confirmation from the data subject that we'll be processing so and so data? Now, once we know all of these, once we're sure about all of these things, that's when we jump into security. Um, Security, like I said before, there are numerous things that we can do, but very basic things that every organization, it's like one size fits all. So there are a couple of things that one can ensure, irrespective of the kind of infrastructure, or is irrespective of the kind of businesses they do. There will be different ways of doing these things, and I'm coming to those things. So one would be, for example, access control. Now, access control for your application, at the application layer, then it could be at the database layer and network layer. On top of this, what is more important is what kind of encryption what kind of access control it is. Are we ensuring that even developers don't get access to the personal data in the plain text? Because developers or DB admins or the DevOps team, they would have access to it. But are we just being confident about they wouldn't misuse it? So that's the thing that organizations should also consider, because when it comes to privacy, we shouldn't be leaving a single loophole that we can think of. So
yes, so great examples. Any other examples you want to add to the security controls for privacy by design, or are these like the most important ones?
Yeah, well, the list can go on, Matthias. For example, other than obviously access control is just the beginning, honestly. After you've controlled the accesses, we also should de-identify data wherever possible, like I said, so that it minimizes the impact of privacy. Privacy at stake should be very, very minimal. Then after de-identification, we obviously have to think of securing the data within the data which is at rest, data in transit, or data in use. There are different ways of doing it. It could be through application level encryption, or database level encryption, or disk level encryption. This decision will vary on the use case for every organization, and of course the infrastructure of every organization. So that's also another important thing. And one very interesting thing is, now access to this encryption keys. Who knows if the developer or the technology team has access to these encryption keys or the credentials which leads to personal data? So we have to think about access control on that part as well. Every organization should be thinking about that as well. Then obviously, very basic thing is that every activity or every access to to personal data should be logged, and there should be either organizations who can do this. They should build capability around anomaly detection, or there are numerous solutions out there in the market to do that for them. So that's another thing one should do. So security by design will also include exercising personal data rights or data retention, and data breach notification, all of that. So the list can go on.
Sounds good. So I think you very nicely touched on the data itself. You also touched on the people. So maybe let's do a segue into the software now that is handling the data. How do you see that? How do you see securing the software, all the bits and bytes that are handling the data, and the people that are using the software? What are your thoughts on that area?
Matthias, honestly, that's a very, very complicated segment. Because when it comes to securing the application, it is not just the application, but it's the infrastructure, whether it is on-premise or cloud, that comes handy with it. And cloud security itself is a huge domain to talk about. But what organization should think about about securing the application is, it could start from secure software development life cycles. For example, secure design reviews or secure code reviews. There are tools out there. There are consulting organizations out there who one can onboard them and then get things done. And apart from that, penetration testing. I'm guessing almost every organization is doing that. But most of us, we just leave things at the vulnerability state, just the vulnerability assessment. Penetration testing, for example, black box testing, really gives you a good picture from a hacker's point of view of where your domain or your security posture stands right now, or red teaming activities. These are certain activities that we must be doing apart from obviously cloud security and infrastructure level security. So again, there's a lot that we can talk about.
Absolutely. So, and I think you've nicely outlined all the tools that we can use in the software development lifecycle. Ultimately, it comes down like, hey, we want to this whole shift left movement, DevSecOps. We want to go back to the source, which is ultimately the developer. So we can, at the end, we can do penetration testing, but we can move this back all the way to the beginning, which is, hey, it's a developer that is writing code. It's the developer that has to be knowledgeable. As you rightfully point out, quite often, we know about problems, but nobody is fixing them. So if we now zoom in onto the developer, and maybe my final question for this very interesting session, how do you see training fit in there? How do you think about upskilling your developers? What are your thoughts on doing things for the developer himself?
That's a very, very interesting question. And I'm not sure if people, anybody would have a perfect answer to this, Matthias. It's just that people are trying, organizations are trying to make sure that developers are in line with security. They understand security and privacy. So I'll share my thoughts on this, and I'll let you know how do I think an organization should be doing this. To me, security has to come naturally to a developer. This is not a different subject. This is as integral to their coding, career and their knowledge that they've gained so far at the time of their engineering. So this has to come naturally to them. So this is more of a cultural change that has to happen. Now, the biggest question is, how do we make that change happen? I think that if I was a developer, if I was given to understand that the application that I'm building will have my personal data, I may get serious about it. So we have to bring that sensitivity amongst, so we don't just have to tell developers that, you have to comply with so-and-so data protection law, or you have to comply with so-and-so privacy law, and this is a compliance thing, and so don't bore them. Neither, we shouldn't be threatening them, around this. We shouldn't be scaring them off. It's about making them more responsible. And that's when, people give their best. They probably will be able to brainstorm better solutions if you give them, why are we exactly doing this? So to me, it is, that's how, I try to do whenever I'm with development teams. I first try to give them the context, not in terms of privacy laws, honestly, not in terms of, this is an audit thing or this is a compliance thing and we have to do it. But I try to convey to them that why it is so important. Let's say if it was my data in a software and I was the one building it, I would want to make sure that I produce the best software, which is going to secure my data to utmost, optimal level that I can. So that's how the developers will start contributing. So that's a very basic thing on the cultural piece. However, when it comes to what should be the strategy, or what should be the approach of training them, this is how I have been doing in the past, where we look for real-time simulators. We don't just bore them with theory on security testing or secure code reviews. Instead, we give them simulators. So there again are good enough products out there in the market, solutions. There are platforms, those who actually offer good simulators, where a developer will first get trained, and then they will have a complete, maybe a one-day event where there will be a actual cyber attack which is happening in a dev environment, and they can probably troubleshoot and fix things and stop it and prevent it, which gets them going. They find it very, very interesting. I've been doing it for a long time now. So I see how developers get interested in this. And of course, we have to also incentivize them. Not just in the monetary terms. I don't think somebody who's serious about security would be more interested in the monetary terms. It's about acknowledgement. It's about acknowledging them that they did really good. They stand out from the other crowd. That's how you attract other crowd as well. So I'm going to put this very simply. Of course, it's the cultural thing. Plus, I would say simulation is one thing that one should be, for developers, simulation is the key of training them.
Very nicely put, Charu. What I remember from this is really the cultural piece. People have to rally around it. Security is just an aspect of security, is what you're saying. It is, it has to be like they do quality. They do security. It's just they do it. It's that simple. And ultimately, what I really like about your statement is, developers do not bore them with videos that are irrelevant to them. It has to be relevant to their day-to-day job, something that they can, relate to and that they can use the next day and do better. With that, Charu, I really, really appreciate you coming on this fireside chat. I really enjoyed it. I hope the people on the call also enjoyed it. Thank you very, very much.
It has been a pleasure talking to you, Matias. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Charu.